you, DJO, our vibe director for the tunes. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Dope People. We're really excited today to welcome the ladies who created the InclusiveBase. And again, Dope People is something that Jacoby and I wanted to feature during this strange time of the amazing people that we met through cannabis, folks that share the same ethos as we do, which is that cannabis can be diverse, inclusive, and have opportunities for everyone. I'd like to introduce Peter Mercado, our On the Revel Chief Knowledge Officer. He is what we call the Encyclopedia Britannica, or our news director of everything cannabis. Peter, how's it going in New York today?
Hey, everything's doing well. It was a long week, but looking forward to this weekend. A lot of stuff happening in cannabis these days, and a lot of different companies out there. There's a lot of change coming, both on the national level, on the state level, but also I think in each of our hearts. So I'm really excited to have Cannaclusive here to talk about everything they've been doing and Almost Consulting on everything they've been doing to push this forward before it was trendy. But hopefully now there's just a momentum, a tidal wave coming with change. So cool. Excited to get into it today.
Nice. And I want to introduce our ladies today. Wong, founder of Almost Consulting, a cannabis marketing agency focused on women and people of color based in Washington. I'd also like to welcome two of the ladies from Cannaclusive, Cassia Graham, Director of National Projects and Social Media for Cannaclusive, and Arlene Peterson, Director of Partnerships. And Cannaclusive, from the very beginning, cannabis advocacy, marketing, and education platform. Also, Kieran, Almost Consulting, has been in the game since the very beginning in Washington State as well. So welcome, ladies. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello.
Thank you for having us.
I wanted to, Peter, can you talk a little bit about what's been going on recently? You mentioned some national things that have been happening in cannabis. Let's have a little chat.
Yeah, so there are two big topics I wanted to discuss today. One is the case of Sean Worsley. Sean was driving through Alabama with his wife, and it happened to be in one of the counties that was dry. And when they went to pump some gas, I guess they just said that their music was loud. So they got approached by an officer. The officer then said that he was smelling marijuana, in which they consented to the search of their vehicle. Sean was a vet and suffers from PTSD. And in his home state of Arizona, he was a medical marijuana participant. And so unfortunately, they found marijuana, and in this county, they found marijuana pills, some alcohol and things like that. The county also happened to be a dry county. So they ended up getting hit with a lot of different charges. They dealt with that. They were able to go back home, but then they got called in for court. And then basically over the course of a year, they really tortured this couple. And yeah, it's horrible. And now this week, it turns out that he got sentenced to 5 years. Luckily, in his plea, he was able to get his wife out of those charges because they were trying to hit both of them with those charges. But obviously, it's a severe case of injustice. They've hit this man. He's had to move. They took away his benefits. And so there are two things I wanted to mention on this. For anybody traveling who happens to be a medical marijuana participant or just is traveling in the States during this time. One is keep your marijuana and any other things in a lockbox in your trunk. Do not consent to search either way, but this also further protects you in case they do search, because they're not allowed to enter any locked boxes without a warrant, which isn't going to happen on site. And so with those two things, I think that this couple would have been able to circumvent all this thing that has terrorized their whole life and changed their whole life for the rest of it. Yeah. But I just want to mention that to our audience and to the world for all of us.
Yeah, and just to add, he also had a traumatic brain injury. And the way that they got the, I guess, confession from him or got him to sign was to basically threaten that his wife would be included on the charges. So that's definitely something that's really important to add. Because of his TBI, he needs to be with someone, with another adult who can help him make informed consent, and that didn't happen.
And I think I'd like just to add that, you know, it is still federally illegal. There is no state reciprocity. So to Peter's point, just be careful, be safe when you're traveling. And there are still states that, you know, act like Alabama, even though they have passed medical marijuana. There's no enactment of that so far in for their state. So everyone be careful, be safe.
Yeah, and there's also reports about if you are a medical marijuana card holder and you potentially are applying for a visa or you're applying for a green card, you just have to be careful there because, you know, immigration lawyers, I'm sure, can confirm, but there have been cases of people getting in trouble for, you know, being associated in any way with cannabis consumption, and then, you know, dealing federally with like a green card or something like that, they can get in trouble. So that's something to think about as well.
Thanks, Kieran. Peter, I know we were discussing a little bit about another thing that's been happening in Colorado.
Yeah, so Colorado is trying to revamp their equity program, which from the beginning hasn't been that great. And now they're trying to revamp it by allowing for franchising. So basically they want to allow already established companies, predominantly white owned and run, to franchise their model to these equity applicants, people of color, to then, the idea is that these established businesses can then teach everything that they need to know in order to establish. But in actuality, it is just making the big players bigger. And I think it's really horrible, a model to pursue. The vote is taking place on July 30th. And I hope our community can let their voices be known, for those of you in Colorado, to fight against this. There are a million other ways to go through to actually have just, equitable cannabis reform, and I really don't think this is the way. But I want to open it up to have a conversation about that.
I guess I'll jump in. I would really love to see, I know a lot of these bigger corporations have licensing deals with supply chain. I have not heard the best scenarios for that. So I would love to hear and have some, you know, research done on how those relationships are working with existing licensing. I don't think we're allowed to say franchising because franchising is still a federal group that manages it. So it's basically licensing deals, but I agree with you, Peter. I think just being under the name of a larger group that is not, as a corporation, that's not really even that involved in the day-to-day operations, is a huge disconnect. Cannaclusive, Almost Consulting, any thoughts?
That just sounds like another way to squirt actual equity and inclusion in the industry. And obviously at some point, I just see if there are any smaller companies connected to these larger companies, them being absorbed. It also makes it harder for people to conduct their business in a fair and ethical way. And the question is also like, who will they be answering to? Will they be fairly independent and working within their own confines, or dealing with bureaucracy and who knows what else with those MSOs?
Yeah, working under the SOPs of an existing group, which is great to help start if you have no experience, but you know, what are the percentages that that you'll be paying directly to the larger entity that you're going to be a franchise owner of, is also interesting. So I think a lot of those things need to be sorted out and understood before any of this type of voting even happens. So. And I know
I mean, there are a few states that are doing it. I mean, I don't think there are any states that are doing it really well. Arlene, sorry, I interrupted you.
No problem. The one thing that is concerning, I mean, there's several things that are concerning, but to have a franchise in the first place is already a complicated process. Um, so to, and this is just like from a regular business sense. So to then add on the very multi-layered aspect of cannabis and the fact that it is still not federally regulated adds another layer of complication that would caution not to get yourself involved in this beginning stage. You want to franchise that badly, there are other industries you can go ahead and be a part of, and invest your money there. But to franchise within a industry that at this point you can only do it in literally one or two states, when the idea of a franchise is that you want to be able to expand nationwide, just isn't a thought process that would recommend for someone to do at this time.
I'm just curious, like when they're thinking about these equity programs, like are they inviting people to come and talk and like ideate together? Or is this just, hey, we're just gonna think what like people of color should want in an equity program? Like, I'm like, let's start from the beginning and get all the, you know, the brain trust together and talking about what is fair and what works and what is wanted versus, hey, we're just gonna do this. So, you know,
It's just the same old, you know, and that's the problem with this industry. And that's another reason why we created, I know we'll talk about it a bit later, but created the accountability list, because these organizations were coming into the industry and not really having to give a care about the people who were most impacted by the war on drugs.
yeah, I'm glad we're going to talk about the accountability list, and I want to learn a little bit more about the defund cannabis that you were talking about, Cassia. That's also been happening. Oh, can you hear me, Cassia?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I'm more of a listener.
Oh, yeah.
And I also noticed that someone in the chat said that Seattle did, but they weren't really listening.
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of opportunity coming up on the East Coast as more states are legalizing to have these types of conversations, and also, you know, the work that you are all doing, almost consulting and Cannaclusive with making voices heard, and I think I just want to jump into the InclusiveBase that both of you kind of merged together. I know. Cannaclusive, you guys were doing lists of you know, organizations and companies and service providers of color, and then Kieran, you were also launched about a year ago the POC list, I believe it was called. Sorry, and what I really love is the fact that, you know, that your two organizations, instead of being competitors, decided to work together and you know, create this really amazing list. And I'll let, you know, please talk a little bit more you know, about why this is so important right now.
Well, what was happening on our end is a lot of people were coming to us saying that they didn't know where to find Black, Indigenous, or POC-owned brands or organizations within the cannabis space. People kept on asking us more and more, and eventually we were like, okay, let's go ahead and create this database, which we later called InclusiveBase. And it's for any and all people of color across any kind of intersectionality. If you see something, if there's a category that you may fall into that you don't see there, please like reach out to us and let us know, because we will definitely add it. And then it was also, we wanted people who were in that space and people of color to be able to kind of digitally congregate with each other. So it's like you can see who is a farmer if you are, you know, there's a product that you want on the market, but obviously you don't want to deal with getting land and growing your own flower and so on. You can see who's a lawyer, who is in real estate and so on. And that way you can network and grow together. And it's also a space for allies who want to work with people of color. So getting their, it can be as simple as getting like their glassware from a person of color, like Elevate Jane is an Asian person who creates these amazing and beautiful, intricate pieces for smoking. You can get your flower from a farm. At that point, I'm not sure if Green Heifer is entirely still around, but they were one that were initially in the database and so on. So it's for all people, but it's specifically for people of color to actually be in that database, but anyone can use it to access people of color.
And I know we've seen a lot of lists pop up recently, especially after, you know, Black Lives Matter movement and Juneteenth. Could you tell us a little bit more about the importance of why your list is, you guys have been doing it for, you know, 2 years now, and the importance of why that's for folks to be, you know, supporting these businesses.
Karen, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, sure. So Cannaclusive has been working internally on their list for much, much longer than I had. They had already been working like over a year, maybe even 2, before I even released the list. So the POC Cannabis Business Directory was launched back in April of last year. And then, yeah, I mean, it was very small and you know, growing. And then Mary reached out and she was like, hey, I've been, you know, working with my team internally for a while now doing this. And our list is, we probably have some overlap, but, you know, our list is probably a little bit more robust. And I was like, oh, great. I'm like, let's, you know, try to get more businesses represented. Let's try to get, you know, more people aware that this exists and it's a resource. So it really only made sense for us to, you know, work together and, you know, join forces. I mean, their organization process was a million times better than mine. I was like manually typing in everybody's name and info. But, you know, when we joined forces, it was like, okay, yeah, let's, you know, continue to amplify and then get more people on this list, people of color, I mean.
And what we've been seeing is a lot of people kind of trying to cannibalize these lists. Karen, myself, Mary, Kendra have worked very hard on InclusiveBase, and I think we're roughly at about 500 plus now. I know the last time we talked to you, we were at like a little over 480 or something. But instead of people amplifying this list that was created by people of color and that we've obviously been working on for quite some time because no one else cared to really harness the power of Black and Indigenous and other people of color. We did that, you know, because of that need. And instead of amplifying, people are just like, well, we're gonna go ahead and, you know, create our own list. The problem with those lists is they're not properly vetted. For instance, Karen goes through InclusiveBase and it's like, okay, this person is not a person of color, this person doesn't belong in this space. So people are just putting these lists out there and just because they kind of are bandwagoning. We've been doing it for Cannaclusive since we've basically been in this space, and this was not done as like a reactionary measure. So all of this reactionary stuff now just seems very performative.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I've seen like very aggregated lists. It looks like reposts of, you know, folks or lists and groups that they've seen like on Instagram. But I really love the fact that, you know, anybody who is added is vetted by all of you. So it's very thorough, it's very complete. And I think it's great. Like we just had some comments about, you know, Lindsay wrote, you know, it's a valuable resource. Sanisa said that they've been using the list while visiting Sacramento. So, you know, thank you again for making this list. And I think it'd be kind of helpful if somebody wanted to maybe show the list and how to search for specific things. Karen, would you want to, you know, take a tour of the InclusiveBase?
Okay, let me see. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So this is InclusiveBase. So you can just type in, you can head to Cannaclusive site or you type it in inclusivebase.com. And what you will see is kind of, you know, a little about the database and, you know, about us. And then you'll see the actual table here. A lot of people know that they're like, I only see the forms. This is the form section that you can fill out if you would like to submit your business. But this is, if you go up, this is the actual table part. And a lot of the time people do not really see this view larger version button in the bottom corner. But if you click on it, it takes you to a nice big display. And in this display, you know, you can go through and you can, you know, scroll, but also you can filter. So you can sort, say, Black owned. And then it'll show you all the Black owned businesses on the list. Or you can search, you know, Black owned and woman owned. And then it'll show you all the options of Black owned and woman owned businesses. Or you can search by location, right? You can search add filter. Here, let's take these ones off. And you can just say like New York, right? And then you look up New York, and then all the New York places add up. So there are definitely, you know, ways to filter and search and, you know, make the function a little bit better. We are definitely working on improving the display, improving the search function, improving the filtering. But yeah, I hope that was helpful.
Oh, it was beautiful. Yeah, I've personally utilized it as well. I was hoping you could talk to the way people can use this. In our chat, there was someone who mentioned they visited Sacramento and they probably wanted to buy from a POC-owned dispensary, and that's how they used it. We also discussed all of us as partners looking for potential growers to collab with or potential media consultants to collab with. If you could talk a little bit more how you want people to engage with it and any testimonials.
Yeah, so, you know, obviously we've gotten some feedback about the searchability and all that stuff, so we're definitely working to improve it always. And any feedback you have, please share. We are accepting feedback, and we'll do our best to incorporate it as soon as we can. But in terms of using the list, you know, something we've noticed is we've had you know, white women or, you know, white LGBTQIA plus folks or, you know, white veterans try to get added on the list. And, you know, we appreciate that, you know, allies are looking at the list and utilizing the resource, but this is a list for people of color to be represented as business owners in the cannabis space, in the hemp space. So with that, we want to encourage allies, you know, if you are a white owner of a business, utilize this resource as a way to, if you have a dispensary, you know, fill your dispensary shelves with, you know, Black and brown owned and, you know, other people of color owned businesses, because it's important that, you know, that representation not only exists in this resource, but actually in the physical world, right? So with that, you know, if you're looking to do a giveaway or some sort of content collaboration or, you know, anything like that, you know, definitely check out the list and consider reaching out to some of those folks that are on there that you see could align with, you know, whatever campaign you're pursuing.
I want to say, you know, thank you also for including ancillary groups. So folks that are photographers, folks that are agencies, folks that are lighting companies, machine fabricators. As an ally, you know, please look for folks that you want to work with and, you know, and all the supporting industries for cannabis as well. So I love that you guys are also including everyone that's touching and non-touching of the plant.
And that's pretty much the highest concentration of people of color in the industry are in the ancillary sections. And when we talk about being in the industry, we frequently remind people that you don't necessarily have to grow, you don't have to own a dispensary. You can come in doing whatever it was that you were doing prior.
Yeah, we've got like cannabis friendly graphic designers and cannabis doulas and all sorts of like incredible categories. And then something else I also wanted to note was when you do use this resource, like please amplify, please share. It's a free resource. We're not asking anyone for money to be listed. We're not asking, you know, for money to use it or to access it. So, you know, please share far, far and wide.
Someone asked a question about what's our vetting process. Can you guys talk to that?
Yeah, so again, with the display improvements that we're working on, we're trying to make that vetting process even easier. But essentially, you know, like I mentioned, right now, there are sometimes, you know, like non-Black, non-people of color owners on there who are like, they put in every single designation. They're like, I'm all the things. And I'm like, I'm gonna double check your business just a second. Or people put, you know, a Black like employee or team member, and you know, trying to pass it off as, you know, a potential owner, even though it's like it's a white owned business. They just, you know, I mean, I'm glad they have, you know, a Black executive. That's great. But the thing is you're still not Black owned, you're white owned. You just are putting a Black person as your token to be represented on this directory. So don't do shit like that, please. We take our time and go through and look at not just like the person that submitted, that could be the brand manager or, you know, the store manager or whoever it is, but finding who the actual owner is and, you know, what their background is and all that stuff. So that's really important to us in making sure that, you know, it's not just a pish posh of, you know, whoever wants to be and claim to be, you know, on the list.
We just had a question from Alicia. Are there ways that, you know, larger and white-owned cannabis companies can help with the list and efforts? It looks like, you know, her company is looking for ways to get their company involved as an ally. Oh, Arlene, I think you're on mute.
Yes, there we go. Sorry, I keep doing that. So Alicia, please feel free to email us specifically so we can, you know, dive in a little deeper. But in general, you know, for those who want to assist, for those who want to, you know, the biggest thing is utilize the resource. If you are a business that is a dispensary, start bringing in some of these companies. The information is literally right there for you to go ahead. You don't have to search. We've already told you they're Black, brown, you know, indigenous owned businesses. Start with that. Also, as far as support of the list, as we mentioned, we don't take payment from anybody. This is a resource that we provide, but we do need to work through providing those resources because we have other things that we're doing. So please feel free to email us so we can figure out exactly what that means. And that goes for anybody. If you want to help with the, you know, calling these businesses that come in and help Cassie and Kieran to make sure that these folk are not just like, oh yes, we're Black owned, and it's like we need time to actually go into, you know, research what the information that is provided is actually correct. So we are also looking for research associates who can help us with that, because at core, this is passion. This is a passion project for us, and it helps everybody within the industry. For, you know, the call of, well, we don't know where they are. Okay, actually, here's all the information right here. And this information is consistently growing and has to be pruned. As everybody now is getting into plants, I like to use the plant analogy of you have to prune the list. You have to, you know, fertilize the list and put water in it, all that stuff, in order for it to make sense. And in order for it to grow and for people to really utilize it in a way. And we're very happy to see that people are using it. That's what we want.
And Alicia, I'm just gonna also comment that one of the things that, you know, I started looking at in terms of positions for the larger cannabis companies is every, you know, person of color is in the diversity and inclusion title. And it would be great to see folks in other roles outside of that, managerial roles, executive roles, decision-making roles. So it's great that these companies are thinking about diversity and inclusion, but that should not be the only role that a person of color holds in a large company.
Finance too. Would love to see more
Love
people of color
CFOs.
on it, please.
So I just saw Jill Cohen's question: can a Jewish woman-owned business go on the list if that Jewish woman is a person of color? And I know that it kind of skirts a weird issue sometimes because there's some, it also depends if that person is solely religiously Jewish or ethnically Jewish. So, but it's primarily for people of color. So like, while those lines can be blurred, we know that race is a social construct. It is if you're Black, Indigenous, Latina, Middle Eastern, and more so like Arab, Middle Eastern, Pacific Islander, and everything in between, because we probably missed some groups because, again, things get very blurry. Those folks can be on the list.
And if folks have other questions, please keep them coming. I'm going to jump a little bit into the more provocative list that you guys have created that people feel, which is the accountability list. You know, I think that was a very brave thing for you guys to come out with and kind of support everything that was going on in terms of these conversations about having more people of color in cannabis. So would love for you to talk a little bit more about how that came about.
The accountability list is inspired by Sherelle Dorsey from The Plug. She created a list where they were holding folks accountable in another industry. So Mary saw that and was immediately inspired. And then for a while, we had just been watching the cannabis industry be incredibly silent as, you know, there was so much state violence against Black, Indigenous, Latina, and other people of color, but primarily Black folks. And after the death of, well, murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and, you know, the list goes on and on because there have been, I think, roughly 20 or more police murders since then. We just realized that the industry was incredibly silent and we wanted to hold people accountable. There were so many people who put up their little Black square and really thought they were doing something, or they just said word on top of word on top of word, but words are nothing without action. So we said, these are the brands that are in a space that was built on the backs of people of color. You've promised that you were going to be part of a fair and equitable industry, and you are not fulfilling that promise. So we're gonna hold your feet to the fire, but not like calling them out. It's a call in, like, we're gonna give you a chance to come correct. And that's essentially what the accountability list is. It's not like this witch hunt, which we've been accused of. It's not for us to further Black supremacy. I'm like, that's not a thing. I actually just saw a tweet where we were announcing some work, some diversity inclusion work with Weed Maps that Arlene can speak towards. And we were called racist. And that's not how racism works. So that's basically what the accountability list is for. It's so consumers know which brands are in line with their values, because why are you giving your money to someone who doesn't care about you or who doesn't care about people that you love, respect, work with, people who take care of you, people who, you know, make it so that you can eat food, the people who are out there in the fields harvesting your delicious strawberries and such are, you know, largely undocumented Indigenous people. The people who are bagging your groceries at Whole Foods who may need medical cannabis are largely Black and Latina young people. You know, shop with brands who care about you and who care about, you know, other people.
And just to clarify, InclusiveBase and the accountability list are two different things. So InclusiveBase is something that Almost Consulting and Cannaclusive work together on. And then Almost Consulting, I claim no ownership over the accountability list. That is very much Cannaclusive and their collaborators' efforts. And it is very time consuming. And the time and dedication that they've put into the accountability list and research and, you know, making sure, like, are these people actually doing the work? And if they're not, let's make sure that that's documented.
And while they are two completely separate lists, they can be used hand in hand, because you pretty much know for a fact that if you're on InclusiveBase, those brands are already in an equitable space. They're already people of color. I'm not saying that all skin folk are kinfolk, but you're already getting a head start by using InclusiveBase.
And that's why I stressed before is that this is a, InclusiveBase is a resource that is already there. A lot of times, a lot of businesses say that they don't know where to start. Start there. Start at InclusiveBase. We have vendors here that you can utilize, and you may just totally may not be paying attention to the fact that you just go off of these circles and people that you know. And the whole point for what the accountability list also is to hold you accountable for, okay, you say you're going to be doing this, you're hiring a certain amount of people, you're putting a certain amount of stuff. All the information that we verify is on public websites that anybody can necessarily Google. It's just we've done the work of Googling the information, verifying the information, and putting it on the list. Now, just people will come back and say, well, that's not right, whatever. Great, give us the information, give us some time to update it, because the other part that we're looking to do is to make sure that this list consistently is out there, that allows people to check. People are making conscious decisions on where they want to spend their money. The recent brouhaha that has come up in the public circle of Goya comes to mind, of people want to make sure that they spend their money with companies that are aligned to their personal values. If you choose to spend money with these companies, that is your choice, but you want to have the information. And all we're asking for is, okay, the information publicly that is out there about you says this. If you dispute that, that's fine. Okay, we're going to go ahead and double check the information you provided us as well, and then we will list it. But the point is, if you know you're not doing right, feel free, we can help you to improve. Again, like Cassia said, and it's a perfect statement of, we're not calling you out. The whole point is not to say, ooh, you did wrong. The whole point is to improve. That's all we want to improve. An equitable business in cannabis helps everybody.
Agreed. And use the accountability list as examples for, if you're not doing enough, there are businesses on there that are doing probably more than you might be. So go there, get some inspiration, add to your action plan, right? Like, use that as a resource for your plan as well. If you are, if you want to claim to be an ally, again, you cannot claim to be an ally. Allyship is something that you work towards, not something you appoint to yourself. But anyway, that's another conversation for another time.
I mean, it really goes back to, again, we just want to make sure that the resources are there for people to make those informed decisions. And we appreciate the help. The women and men who have helped us with the accountability list, these are people who have taken time out of their day doing what they're doing to make sure that this list was, so that's also something that we want to make sure is clear. Cannaclusive didn't just decide to, oh, we're just gonna go ahead and do this list, and look at you, you're doing wrong. This was, so the information was sourced, again, from public information that was already out there. And we've put it into one place where you can go ahead and look. So, this also aligns to these businesses who want to increase the way that they are doing their diversity and inclusion efforts. Okay, now you have two resources. If your name is on this list, because we haven't gotten everybody, let's make sure that's clear. We're still adding, so we want to make sure that's abundantly clear. We're still adding to it. That here are these companies. You want to get on this list, make sure that the information that we're getting, that if your information on your website is incorrect, you need to fix that. We can't change it. We've actually gotten back from a couple of companies like, that's not right. We're like, this literally is on your website. I don't know what to tell you. After that, like, you said it, we didn't. And that's something that we also want to make sure as we continue to talk about this, we're not making up any information. Everything that we've put onto both lists, public information, and especially when it comes to the InclusiveBase, this is information that someone has actually inputted. We didn't go and say, hey, you know, website is wrong or whatever. You put that information in. Our job, all we really do is just double check that you are a company that is in the that you fall within biopic accountability list. We're going off of public information. We're not making anything up. And a lot of times people get into this mentality of like, we're trying to have a, you know, bullseye on people's backs. No, we're not. That's so not what we do.
Also, just because you're in talks of doing something and internally working it out doesn't mean it's actually implemented. That's just.
And then the other item with regards to the accountability list is, although Arlene mentioned that it is public information, sadly, these companies are not very transparent, because sometimes you will have trouble finding out who owns the company. If a company is listed, they may not have like their stock information directly on their page. So there's a lot of searching and digging, although it is public, because they don't want anyone thinking, oh, well, I can do that. Have you got the couple of 100 hours you spent so far in a matter of what, a little over a month? Do you have that time? Because if you do, like, come help us.
It's really amazing how many shell LLCs there are that you can, you know, go down a rabbit hole because the owners do not really want to be named as the owners. So, yeah.
And just, you know, I've been saying this a lot this week. If somebody claims that they are a minority-owned business and you can't find any information about what minority-owned, who or what minority they fall under, they're not a minority-owned business. Because we proudly claim being a Black-owned business. Kieran proudly proclaims she is an Asian-owned business. Like, there's no hiding when you are who you are. So if someone's claiming, oh, we're owned this way, but you can't find a person of color on a website or anything to verify, usually you're not. And that's actually why there's a lot of pushback, because like Lulu said, people with the shell companies and the smoke and mirrors, we put the fan on and we're blowing the smoke away. And people don't like the fact that the smoke is being pushed away. Okay, then start actually improving your efforts and stop actually taking away from people who are doing the work and actually want to do this.
I was going to ask, right now it seems the InclusiveBase is primarily American focused. Are you, oh no, it's international?
It's international. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All over the world. Yeah.
Hey.
I love that. Well, I wanted to thank you ladies very much again for joining us. And again, everybody who joined us as attendees, please share the InclusiveBase to folks. If you have friends who have businesses, please encourage them to add themselves. Oh, hold on, we have one more question I'm just gonna throw out there. Why aren't women included in minority-owned? They're just as a minority in ownership, C-suite, and executive positions. So
we're talking about people of color. So if you are a woman of color, absolutely get on the list. But if you are a white woman, this list is not for you. And if you're uncomfortable with that, please evaluate why you are uncomfortable with that.
Amen. So again, yeah, thank you again. Like I said, if you have friends of color who are looking to connect, please have them add themselves to this list. If you are an ally who is wanting to support, please use this list as a base. And thank you again, ladies, very much for your time today. Thank you everyone for joining Dope People. Next week, we are going into the pantry with Felicity from Potley. So we hope you enjoy, we hope you join us next week. And DJ O, I'm gonna have you take it away, and please stay on and listen to the set if you have time, and we'll see you again. Thank you very much, everyone.